in, Justin Baldoni's team has issued a response in opposition to dismiss the New York Times. And there is a bit of a smoking gun. Christopher Melcher's here to break it down.
What if I told you Blake Lively's deposition wasn't just about paparazzi fears, but a carefully calculated move? From hidden cameras to controlling the narrative, we'll uncover the alleged tactics that are stirring up Hollywood's legal waters.
Now look, we talked about it even when we were filming the documentary. We've talked about it. This suit against the New York Times is hard. It's very hard to win these types of suits. But what's interesting is his response is a sort of mention of a video in tandem with the release of the article. I want to play it quickly. Wait, I'll have it. Sorry, that's me sending you the Zoom link. Here it is. Here is the clip in question. Now, this video
filed on Friday.
Thank you to citizen journalists for putting it on easily accessible. This was part of the article. I paid for New York Times. It's not showing up right now. We're trying to tape quickly, but in there I can verify there was a video that Megan Twohey sort of edited. So not only, Chris, did they compile a massive article with all the text and all the research, they went and edited a video as well, all within like 24 hours, which seems incredibly
and other documents that we've obtained reveal what really happened. A campaign to tarnish Lively after she alleged that Justin Baldoni, her co-star and director, and Jamie Heath, the producer, had engaged in misconduct while shooting the film.
Now, again, keyword there, the alleged smear campaign, but listen to what Megan herself, the author, says.
In a legal complaint Lively filed on Friday, private text messages and other documents that we've obtained reveal what really happened.
Blake Lively's legal team claimed they were only trying to shield her from the relentless swarm of paparazzi when they requested a change in the deposition's location. On paper, it seemed like a reasonable ask. After all, privacy is something nearly unattainable for someone with her level of fame. Instead of attending at the designated site, her team proposed moving the deposition just a mile away to her lawyer's office. But here's where things get murky. Justin Baldoni's team wasn't buying the paparazzi fears excuse. To them, this wasn't about shielding Lively from flashing cameras, but about gaining an unfair advantage. Baldoni's lawyers were quick to speak out, arguing that the relocation wasn't as harmless as it might seem. By holding the deposition in a location so familiar to Lively, they suggested it would prevent privacy for themselves. One of their main concerns was the proximity of Lively's office, situated down the road, where the possibility of oversight, intentional or not, wasn't off the table. They accused her team of trying to control every detail behind the scenes, and pointed out how staying at the lawyer's office could allow for secret recordings or surveillance. Baldoni's camp understood that this wasn't just an act of self-preservation on her part. It was strategic, and they weren't about to let it slide. Adding fuel to the fire, Brian Freeman, Baldoni's lawyer, took things a step further with a cutting remark that left no doubt about how he viewed the situation. After Lively's side claimed she was ready to tell her story, Freeman sarcastically suggested hosting the deposition in Madison Square Garden and selling tickets to it. It was a pointed jab, not just at Lively, but at the spectacle her defense seemed to be creating around such a serious legal matter. He even said the proceeds could go toward survivors of domestic abuse, a loaded comment meant to highlight his client's position as well as the supposed theatrics of Lively's team. Meanwhile, this choice of venue raised eyebrows among legal experts and commentators. A host from Popcorn Planet broke it down further, speculating that changing the location to somewhere so close to Lively's personal space could give her even more leverage than anyone realized. By operating from what was essentially her turf, Lively might have the ability to limit what Baldoni's team could say or do strategically. The move also opened the door to high-tech surveillance, confidential information leaks, and even public exposure of sensitive details if the deposition setup wasn't entirely secure. When all was said and done, the deposition's location was about far more than comfort or paparazzi. It was about power. This wasn't just a skirmish over geography, it was a battle of control behind closed doors. What's wild is how this twist barely scratches the surface. As Blake Lively issued subpoenas against content creators, things escalated, and not in the way her team might have hoped.
So right there, Chris, that's not an opinion, that's not a maybe, that's not a what really happened. Now, is that going to be problematic for them moving forward?
Well, it's significant. So in the United States, where this lawsuit is pending, it's very difficult to sue a journalist media outlet because we have this First Amendment protection for the press. And that's super important because powerful people, would be able to destroy a journalist or media outlet by suing them for defamation or libel and keep them from reporting the truth. And so we have given, as a matter of policy, massive protections for the media and other journalists to fairly comment on stories that have not been proven to be true yet or not, so we can get this word out here. Now, and that's what the New York Times is coming back and saying, look, we're not Blake Lively. We're not the ones making the allegation. We're just fairly reporting on what Blake is suing Justin and Wayfarer for. And if that's all they did, they would be absolutely protected. But that's not what happened. According to this video that we're seeing, that clip, they're going in vouching for the story. That's where they made the mistake. If they would have said, Blake alleges that, or according to Blake, blah, 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 this happened, they'd be protected. But they said, and her title is investigative journalist. So she's investigative journalist for the New York Times. So that is implying that she's done an investigation. She's actually looked in this. We can trust her. We can trust the New York Times. They've done their vetting. That's the representation impliedly it's being made. And she's saying, yes, there's a lawsuit by Blake, but we, the New York Times, have looked into it, and this is what really happened. So now they're stating as a fact, not as an opinion, that this happened, and that's how they're going to get into trouble.
Blake Lively's decision to subpoena content creators who discussed her case online was a bold legal move. But bold doesn't always mean wise. Almost immediately, this strategy triggered accusations of censorship, with many arguing it was an assault on free speech. Among those subpoenaed was Andy Signore, the host of Popcorn Planet, who wasted no time in calling out the tactic during one of his shows. He shared how the subpoena targeted creators like himself who merely discussed the case publicly, highlighting the backlash Lively's team began to face as fans and influencers rallied against what they perceived as heavy-handed legal intimidation. The outrage didn't stop there. What might have been a quiet legal maneuver spiraled into a PR nightmare when Molly McFersonson, a crisis management expert, broke down why this move was a catastrophic miscalculation on Lively's part. According to McFersonson, issuing subpoenas in this kind of situation doesn't silence narratives, it amplifies them. She explained how these legal actions essentially guaranteed an explosion of public commentary, especially as traditional news outlets weren't dominating the conversation at the time. This left social media, and by extension the content creators, at the forefront of the story. And instead of reining in the narrative, Lively's team inadvertently gave it more oxygen. McFersonson didn't hold back her criticism. She pointed out that actions like this almost always backfire for public figures, damaging their credibility. The subpoenas, she said, were seen as an attempt to muzzle dissenters, making Lively seem defensive at best and controlling at worst. A crisis becomes a crisis when trust is broken, McFersonson explained, and these subpoenas shattered far more trust than they could ever rebuild. By casting such a wide legal net and pulling creators into the crosshairs, Lively's team gave the impression of desperation, trying to suffocate criticism rather than confront it head-on. In an ironic twist, the subpoenas only heightened the visibility of the content Lively's lawyers were actively trying to suppress. Creators who might not have had widespread attention before suddenly found themselves in the spotlight, along with the comments and videos that irritated Lively's camp in the first place. The court of public opinion responded swiftly, turning what could have been a small legal detail into a key talking point in her larger legal drama. What was supposed to silence critics ended up reinforcing the very narratives Lively's team wanted to erase. Instead of controlling the fire, these subpoenas poured gasoline on it. People began questioning why someone with nothing to hide would go so far as to subpoena individuals who simply shared opinions. For Lively, the damage wasn't just reputational, it was strategic. And this particular misstep raised deeper questions about whether these decisions came from misjudgment or something even more chaotic within her own team. Could internal friction be the real issue here?
As they go in and sort of report in their sort of statement in this full opposition, yeah, they publish a story, we can bury anyone. But along with the article, the video featured New York Times journalist Megan Twohey, who co-wrote it with these others, purporting to tell the world what really happened, specifically that Wayfair orchestrated a retaliatory campaign to tarnish Lively after she alleged that Baldoni and Heath engaged in misconduct. The article and video echoed and compounded the baseless accusations made by Lively and her co-defendants about Wayfair and falsely accused them of having waged a smear campaign against Lively. The press enjoys the fair report privilege when faithfully relying the contents of a filed complaint, but that is not what the New York Times did. It admittedly based its article and video on its reporter's review of thousands of pages of documents and expressly credited Lively's claims, framing them as having been verified by the New York Times' own investigation. In doing so, they forfeited the fair report privilege. Do you agree with that? Is that a fair argument?
Absolutely agree with it. And we also have to understand where we're at, or where this lawsuit is at. It's at the beginning stages. So Justin has sued the New York Times and others. New York Times has come back and said, look, even if everything he said about us is true, it does not amount to a legal cause of action. Okay, so that's the motion to dismiss. Even if everything he said about us is true and we're proven to a jury, we could not be held liable for it because we're a journalistic outlet and we have this fair reporting privilege and other defenses that we're raising. So that's the test that the judge has to apply, and we assume the truth of the allegations when we're ruling on a motion to dismiss. So this is not the trial. So it's not like what actually happened. It's did Justin plead or assert enough allegations against the New York Times, if proven to be true at trial, would amount to a legal cause of action for damages against them. Absolutely, I think he's overcome that defense of fair reporting, so he's going to survive on that one.
And then we have this other issue, that the salacious article and video, well before Twohey contacted Wayfair, the night before publication for fact-checking, after the New York Times had months of plotting with Lively's partners, the Wayfair parties, got hours to respond. I mean, I guess, is that okay? Like, it doesn't seem okay to me if they're supposed to be the bastion of journalism, right? But, if they had just said it's the opinion, would this have mattered? Will this factor in the fact that they did seemingly have this for months due to the metadata and things that we're seeing?
Well, this goes to the second complaint that he has against them, or cause of action, which is for breaching a promise. And so what clearly the New York Times, according to even to that clip, they investigated, they spent a lot of time, they vouched for these claims. They approached Justin and Wayfair on the evening of December 20th, so 5 days before Christmas. It's the first time he's being contacted and by the media, and they're saying, hey, we're running a story tomorrow at noon.
Could the real chaos in Blake Lively's case be coming from her own team? That's the question many are now asking after a series of decisions that seem less like calculated moves and more like self-inflicted damage. Rumors are swirling that someone within her crisis management camp might actually be sabotaging her image, whether intentionally or through sheer incompetence. Let's start with the subpoenas targeting content creators. On the surface, this looked like a straightforward legal play to control the narrative. But as backlash poured in, experts like Molly McFersonson were quick to point out just how badly this move shattered public trust. McFersonson noted that instead of silencing critics, these subpoenas brought even more attention to the very stories Lively was trying to bury. Hardly the outcome you'd expect from a well-run crisis team. But that's not all. The decision to push for Lively's deposition to take place on her home turf, under the guise of privacy concerns, also backfired spectacularly. Her legal team might have seen this as a bold defense strategy, but many observers called it controlling, even manipulative. It's hard to imagine how seasoned professionals couldn't foresee these moves being scrutinized so harshly. This led McFersonson to speculate whether Lively's inner circle could actually be one of her biggest problems. She described the team around her as being too focused on outmaneuvering critics and not enough on building trust with the public. In her words, somebody needs to tell Blake to stop playing chess and start leading with resilience and honesty. McFersonson also argued that Lively's advisors are out of touch, calling their approach delusional and warning that their current tactics could permanently damage her reputation. Instead of hiring experts equipped to deal with public perception, like a sharp PR strategist, there are concerns the team is packed with people more interested in controlling optics than addressing real concerns. But here's an even wilder theory. What if this isn't just about poor strategy? Some insiders are questioning whether someone within Lively's team might be actively working against her. Leaks from her camp and questionable decisions have raised red flags about loyalty. The idea of sabotage may sound extreme, but does it explain why every move seems to blow up in her face? From the failed subpoenas to the deposition optics, the missteps keep piling up, and it's hard not to wonder if this is more than just bad advice. If this chaos really stems from inside her own camp, it's not just Blake Lively against critics and the courts. It might be Blake Lively against her own inner circle. But there's another key player in this story, someone who should have her back but might be complicating things even more. Ryan Reynolds. Is he helping her get through this storm, or is his silence adding fuel to the fire?
The reason why they want to do this so quickly is that they don't want the target to come over the top with their own article, with their own aligned media outlet, which all exist, all right? So Blake Lively's aligned with New York Times, Justin and Wayfarer might have aligned with another media outlet, run and got their own story out there first, beat New York Times to the punch. They never want that happening, so that's why they don't give the target any meaningful opportunity to do it. So here's why he's suing them. It's super creative. They said, evening of December 20th, hey, Justin, here's all this horrible stuff we're going to print about you. You have until tomorrow at noon. We'd love to hear your response. He engages with them. He says, okay, here is some information. I think he gave it to them on the morning of the 21st. Here's some partial information. I'm still working on it. I'm going to get the rest of this information or whatever before noon. And New York Times prints a story prior to noon with the partial information. And my guess is they were worried another outlet was going to hit this story. So what he's saying is that, hey, we had a promise here together that you were going to give me till noon. I said, okay, I was cooperating with you. You ran the story before noon without my complete information, and therefore you didn't vet this properly, and you broke our promise. Super creative claim.
Well, it's true, because even if you have till noon, that you'd think they'd still take time to put his responses in the article, right? And instead, they just released it a couple hours earlier. One more thing while we have you on this, just because I don't want to take this too long, but they're bringing up the whole California versus New York, and they're arguing that California's tort claims, et cetera, damages in California are different because make their personal and professional homes. They may make claims in California. So they're basically using this. You guys can pause and read this more specific to get in the nitty gritty, but clearly they're trying to change where it goes. What is your thoughts on that? Ken, since this is in New York, is the fact that they live in California and California has these rights, will that help them too?
Yeah, so the case is pending in New York, but what Justin is saying is that California's substantive law should apply on this placing somebody in a false light. So California recognizes a claim for damages or for money for placing somebody in a false light. New York doesn't have that same law. What Justin, I think, is correctly saying is that, hey, I'm a California guy. My company, I guess, is California. All these other people are in California. You, New York Times, based in New York, knew that publishing this story would impact me and others in California. So you reached out and touched us in California, so now California law applies.
Interesting. So I guess, because I know previously we talked about how hard this case is, does this give you pause now to think maybe they do have a shot?
Yeah, I think it's extraordinarily difficult to sue a media outlet and be successful. Most of these are done just for press, like, oh, I'm suing the New York Times for all this money, and they end up getting, devastated. Here, I think he has a pathway, and even if it doesn't succeed, meaning he doesn't get to a jury or a jury says, hey, I'm going to give you $1 or something like that, I like that he's exposing this because, we hope that journalists would actually investigate completely. We hope that journalists would give each side a fair chance rather than smearing and destroying one side.
Ryan Reynolds has always been considered Blake Lively's greatest cheerleader, both in Hollywood and at home. So why does it seem like his role in her legal drama is raising more questions than answers? As the backlash against Lively continues to grow, speculation about Reynolds' involvement, or lack of it, has people wondering whether he's quietly standing by her side or unintentionally making things worse. According to crisis management expert Molly McFersonson, Reynolds might be playing a bigger role in the chaos than anyone first realized, even if that role isn't intentional. McFersonson points out that Reynolds has the resources to privately seek expert advice during this legal storm. Yet he appears to be doing anything but that. Instead, he's coming across as caught in the public spectacle, with his silence feeding into the frenzy rather than controlling it. She suggests, "This isn't support, it's spiraling." Reynolds is lost in the worst of ways when it comes to PR crisis management. That's a sharp critique of someone who's typically known for his calculated and savvy public image. For an actor so adept at balancing humor with sincerity online, his approach toward this has been surprisingly hands-off, at least from a public perspective. Theories about Reynolds' involvement span the spectrum. On one end, some believe he's taking a deliberate step back to keep focus off himself and avoid making the situation worse. On the other, there's growing speculation that his quiet stance is emblematic of deeper disconnects, not only between him and Blake, but also between him and the reality of the legal trouble she's in. McFersonson notes that if Reynolds were following proven crisis management strategies, he'd focus on repairing trust and owning the mistakes that have been made. But instead, his inaction comes off as a failure to grasp how vital it is to send the right message during moments like these. What's caught even more attention is Reynolds' history of witty, visible social media presence, which feels oddly out of place now that Lively's reputation is on shaky ground. One specific moment that fueled these speculations was a comment he made weeks earlier about staying out of trouble, while joking with a fan on Instagram. Though it was likely unrelated to the case, fans jumped on the remark, interpreting it as a sign he was intentionally distancing himself from Lively's legal fiasco. This minor misstep, whether coincidence or subtle dig, only generated more rumors about where Reynolds truly stands amid the controversy. So, whether through silence or stray comments, Reynolds' presence or absence in this narrative has been impossible to ignore. To McFersonson, his lack of an active role looks less like love and loyalty and more like emotional avoidance, and that's a dangerous game to play when reputations and careers are on the line. While Reynolds might think he's staying neutral, the optics lean toward him complicating things further by refusing to address the elephant in the room. But the stakes aren't just about public perception anymore. They involve Lively's ability to control this narrative. And as the drama continues to unfold, the next major shakeup is the judge's controversial decision that some claim exposes yet another layer of celebrity privilege. The judge's decision to approve Blake Lively's request to hold her deposition at her attorney's office has stirred serious controversy. What initially sounded like a standard legal choice quickly morphed into something much bigger. Critics are questioning whether this ruling was truly about fairness, or if it reveals how Lively's celebrity status is influencing the courtroom. He gave Blake yet another victory, basically allowing her to decide where she would be deposed, commented Popcorn Planet's host. That sounded simple enough, right? Until you consider what this decision actually meant. For starters, the change of location handed Lively's team significant control over the proceedings. By allowing her to stay on her turf, critics argue the environment could be manipulated to her advantage. Justin Baldoni's legal team pushed back hard on this, bringing up specific concerns over privacy, or the lack of it. They worried that being in Lively's attorney's office, so close to her own, limited their ability to discuss anything in private. There's no private place in her office that you'll be able to then talk legally in between when you take breaks, the host emphasized. This wasn't just about convenience, they argued. This was about keeping an even playing field. And that's not even the shadiest part. The fear of potential monitoring or recordings loomed large. When you're at Blake's office, they can be tapped in listening to anything they want. It's super shady, another pointed remark from Popcorn Planet revealed. To Baldoni's team, holding the deposition in such a controlled environment felt like a trap. It wasn't hard to see how this could be spun as a power move, one that might prevent open, honest exchanges from flowing during the actual testimony. Brian Freeman, Baldoni's lawyer, didn't hold back when expressing his frustration with this decision. After hearing Lively's team declare her readiness to tell her story, Freeman sarcastically shot back by suggesting the deposition could just as well be held in Madison Square Garden, complete with ticket sales. "Yeah, she's ready to tell the story," mocked Freeman. His jab wasn't just aimed at the theatrics surrounding this deposition, but also highlighted his belief that Lively's camp was using legal maneuvers to craft a spectacle. This has only fueled suspicions of favoritism. The judge's ruling, while legally binding, left people asking a key question. Wait, why does she get this special treatment? The fact that this concern is coming up at all shows how strongly public perception has shifted against Lively. By allowing her to dictate the location, Many believe the judge unintentionally paved the way for debates about celebrity privilege in legal settings. And this decision doesn't just reflect poorly on the court, it sets a tone for what's to come. A precedent like this could make it harder to separate stars from their fame when considering fairness in legal battles. For Lively, the stakes grow higher with every misstep, magnifying the consequences of public opinion. But if there's one thing this ruling has made clear, it's that the legal battle isn't just happening in the courtroom. It's unfolding in real time in the eyes of the world. Blake Lively's legal drama might be creating more problems than it solves. Experts suggest her strategies, like controlling the deposition location and targeting content creators with subpoenas, are damaging her public image instead of protecting it. One source even called these moves fueling the fire, highlighting the growing perception that her actions are more about control than accountability. This isn't just about a legal battle anymore. It's about trust. With critics questioning the advice from her inner circle, it's clear Lively may need a serious course correction. What do you think? Missteps or mismanagement? Share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe.